pleased to be here with all of you. Okay, so we're going to get started on my presentation when I find my fancy clicker. And you see that these, you can have good days and bad times, of course, both. And we're going to cover the challenging times of the teenage years. But first, I would like to go over some qualifiers. Probably one of the more important qualifiers on the material I'm going to talk about is the fact that I want to talk about information related to Calvin and Hobbes. What assurance do I have that your parenting isn't screwing me up? Okay, so you have to answer to the Calvin and Hobbes standard here. And I'm from academics, and so I'm going to report to you evidence-based research, as we call it in the trade. So, if Calvin and Hobbes was your kid and a clinical psychology student, he'd just come back to you and say, what evidence-based research backs up your parenting? So we're going to bias toward academics. This is another really important slide. You can tell I like the New Yorker. I would share it, but I'm not there developmentally. Okay, so, we tend to be really nice about little kids not doing things the way we want. It's time to share. Somebody came over, and that's the rule. You share your toys, or they, throw food and various things, and you kind of understand they're impulsive and they're immature and so forth. The problem is when kids get to be about this age, and they're acting in all those messy ways that go along with being a teenager. They talk back, they're rude, they're impulsive, they have nasty attitudes sometimes. They don't come with a software manual to tell you how they are acting as normally as little kids that don't share or don't have good manners. But they're bigger. Is there getting feedback out there? Or is it just me? But they're getting bigger. And one of the problems with teenagers is as they get bigger, we think they should be acting more maturely than is appropriate for you to expect, and I'll explain that a lot. Not that we don't parent and have authority and manage them so that they develop those skills, but it would be easier if he said, I would be respectful and control my reactivity, but I'm not there developmentally. They don't do that, right? But it's fair game. Okay, so this is my not original pie diagram. Anybody that would do research to bring to you the most important predictors of success among teenagers would come up with some list like this. I happen to put a whole chapter on self-control, so that one might not be in the average book. But if you took 50 books on adolescence, you'd find them talking about some aspect of the close parent-child relationship, academic, social, emotional health, physical health, and maybe, somebody like me throws in one on character development, one of my favorite subjects. But you'll have some lists like this, because these are the predictors of success in late adolescence and high school. And when we talk about success or positive outcomes, we're always talking about the same things. We're talking about achievement in high school, getting in college, doing well in college, getting a job, keeping the job, successful marriages, hopefully one, that'd be nice. It's easier that way. Stable friendships and so forth, so, and psychological health. And so these are now how to get there from here, how to actually build these strengths and what we're going to talk about tonight. However, you only need to be good enough. Some of us are so worried about getting all this just perfect that we have unrealistic ideas about even ourselves, being the perfect parent and so forth. But out of being imperfect, our children, our adolescents learn about the world, right? You're not there every minute to fix their problems, and thank goodness, because that's how they learn. You're supposed to supervise, but not, of course, pick up every piece of difficulty that they have and solve their problems for them. So we're going to keep coming back to that because I don't want to give you an inferiority complex. That's not the goal of the evening. It's to actually inspire you to do a little improvement, but not be perfect. Okay, now this is also absolutely not original. This is all over the world by now that we know after 50 years of parenting research, the way we should bias our parenting is what's called positive parenting. Because if you're mostly negative or you use punishment too much, your children do not listen to you. You cannot influence them. So even though it happens in many homes that they're triggering you all over the place because of their bad attitudes, their moodiness, whatever, bad grades, it's very natural to respond to that with negativity, but it doesn't work. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is how to solve problems in effective ways. But notice that the first half of this is just being empathic in conversation and being responsive to them. And another hunk is just through encouragement and praise and problem solving with them. Now, look at that little black pie piece that's very thin. When we talk about discipline in terms of consequences or punishment, it should be a small slither. Because if you have more than that small amount of consequences or negative consequences or punishment, your approaches won't work. So what else do we have in our toolbox? That's what we'll be talking about. I want you to remember that discipline comes from the Latin root to teach. Did you know that? Discere. A lot of people think discipline means punish. It doesn't. It means everything in this pie. It's the way we influence. You know, parents are teachers, so how do we teach in effective ways without getting overly negative? Okay, so let's get started. The first and most important pie piece is secure attachment, which is a fancy word. It's more than love. You know, everybody here loves their children, but most people in jail who've been abusive, neglectful, who've, you know, parented in abysmal ways, will also say that they love their children. Love is the engine, love is the driver, but the actual group of strengths that make up secure attachment among parents of teenagers, because you know it's good behavior, you know what it is for babies, it's keeping them warm, it's feeding them appropriately, it's making sure that they're taken care of. But it's a lot harder with teenagers. So just to remind you about positive outcomes, and how well this has been studied since the 1970s. And when I say study, it means that when you look at 4-year-olds, then you look at 8, 10, 12, 15, 18, 25. And when you can control for all the important variables, and you actually can then figure out causality. So when I say secure attachment produces good outcomes, it's backed up by a lot of research. So things like, yes, the parents that show, and I'll describe more what it is in a minute, but show more secure attachment behaviors instead of anxious, avoidant, and overly negative, would have better psychological adjustment in the teens, academic achievement, self-control. We're going to talk a lot about self-control, trusting and stable relationships, resilience, and less substance use. Just as an example, I'm not going to do this all through the night because I know you're not here for a graduate study class, but that shows you what our end goal is. So what is it? It's not that mysterious. We first start out, of course, with acceptance. We accept them exactly how they are in the little package with temperament they came to us with. And of course, we want them to also improve many of their habits. But everything has to start with radical acceptance. We show interest in them. You know, we want them to be interested in biology and service work and working this summer. You know, we have our agenda, but we need to show interest in what they have interest in. You know, two of my friends are academic physicians, and their son was interested in a lot of things, but mainly ultimate frisbee. His goal is to get ultimate frisbee, and he still may do it. He's grown now, he's in college. His goal is to get into the Olympics. It took them a long time to accept their son exactly the way he is. He's not going to be an academic type. He wants to be a coach. He's in college, he can be a coach. But they had a really rough time accepting him for not being the intellectual type. And there could be, I've worked with another family where the father that was an accountant, and he wasn't accepted because he went to college, and he comes from a family of farmers. So we all have these agendas of having an athlete or having a brainiac, and we're supposed to accept the person that we get, not the one we want. We want to respect their feelings. More than half of feelings might even be negative. We need to accept that that's part of the whole rubric of emotional. We'll come back to that. Attuned to their feelings, empathy, responsive to their developmental needs. That doesn't mean responsive to their needs like they come to you and say, I need $20 and you're an ATM machine, right? That's not the kind. Developmental needs might be you don't say yes to the $20, right? So you have to know what they need developmentally and be responsive on that level. And of course, reliable support. Okay, now that all sounded really nice, but now I'm going to tell you why it's over-determined that would be a really hard goal list to accomplish. It's over-determined. So first let's start with this. The developmental task of teenagers, of course, everybody knows it, it's to form a separate and unique identity, right? And there's everything from politics to education goals to sexual values to attitudes about substance use. The whole gamut, been studied since the 1940s. It's a whole developmental theory into itself. And you know, you were teenagers. You didn't become just clones of your parents. You tried on different values of your generation and from your experience, and that trying on different values during high school and college, you came out with an integrated set of your own experience and from your parents. But they're going to individuate from you. They're not individuating from the coach or from your neighbor or from your sister. It's from you. I remember when my brother once went up by a little kid said, "Laura, you know, your kids are great when they're not with you." And he thought that was some big testimony to the shrink sibling, you know. And I said, "Well, of course they're worse with me. I'm their parent." He actually thought that was an important kind of, our kids are always worse than with us. There was an amazing study, it was actually done here at University of Chicago years ago by Reed Larson and company. And they did what at the time was called a beeper study. Now, what's a beeper, right? But these, when beepers were invented, they were given to teenagers of several thousand. It was a big study all over the United States. And when the kids were beeped, they were supposed to fill out random moment, it's called random moment surveys. Now, of course, we still have this, but it'll be on the phone and you fill it out on the phone, little mood checklist. And there was lots of very important questions in this study, but one of the little side things they discovered is when teenagers are with their parents, they feel 10 times worse than any other time of their day. Right? They get in touch with their negativity around you, right? Now, what's hard about this, because it's perfectly normal, right, is they're individuating from you, and I'm going to go into that in a minute, is that you think you know your child. Isn't that funny? Well, you do. You actually know many parts of your child that many other people don't, because some of their grumpies really is about moods or their more complicated personalities because they put on the happy face elsewhere. But it also means when your friends who have children your kid's age, so that they see them without you, and they say, "Your kid is lovely. They empty the dishwasher when I ask them. They play with the younger kid in my family beautifully. They're responsive at the dinner table." And then you'll say, "I gotta give you the social security number because that's not my kid," right? You can't believe some of the good things you hear, right? Don't you hear this all the time? You'll say, "Surely don't." I remember I went to the 9th grade back to school night, and I saw my son interacting with somebody. You know, he's standing up straight, he was, shaking hand, and he was smiling and responsive. I went, "Who is he?" I had not seen that kid in years, right? But I just hadn't caught him. Usually he's with me, so we get these dirty samplings of what we think our child is. Dirty, like a dirty urine sample. You know what a dirty urine is? That's my drug talk, sorry, different talk. But if the sampling of your child's behavior is always in the company of you, it's a contaminated sample, right? So just keep that in mind. Children, I know you're taking offense that your kids are so grumpy with you. It's part of the individuation process. There is something a little bit similar. Oh, you've heard of puberty too. That adds to the, I'm not gonna do puberty. Q&A, everything's fair game. Bring back puberty. But I wanted to make this point. Don't let anybody know outside this room I said this, because one time a reporter actually, quoted me in the wrong way. He said, terrible teen, twos turn into terrible teens. Big headline, front page of Seattle Times. I was so angry. But the reason why he got that quote wrong was the first autonomy is the twos. I call them terrific twos, for the record. No. Remember that? I know I'm separate from you. I'm the boss of me. That's the first separation. The second separation, the second autonomy, is early adolescence. They say no, in new and diabolical ways. They just don't do the no. It's, you're not the boss of me, but it's, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot, and many other sort of things that they might tell you that they don't want to be a part of you. But part of the reason why I like to talk about this is, when your little toddler gets in the car and they just have meltdowns the minute school is over? Because literally, the willpower, with love, I have a whole chunk in my book about willpower. It's actually a finite quality. You use it up during the day. That's why some people just say, "Where's the martini?" at 5 p.m. They're just unglued and they just need a reset, and that's the way they do it. Or, "I need my exercise." Well, teenagers are really at the end of their rope by 3:30, exactly the way other people and preschoolers are. And the minute they get with you, they show that unraveling, right? Because all day long they had to keep it together and not cry, you know, when the girl that they like is paying attention to another boy. They had to not punch the Spanish teacher in the nose who had a pop quiz. They had to not, you know, get nervous with their friends when they didn't know it. I mean, they are holding it together all day. And then they get with you, the secure base. Isn't that great? And so they can unload on you. You displace on you. You know, you remember that they used to call it the kick the cat principle. You know, you can't punch the nose of your boss, so you come home and you just kick the cat. Well, that's kind of what teenagers do to you. Do you ever feel like that? Am I matching your feelings? You do have normal teenagers, right? So they, you know, they're secure with you. They have to worry about their friends. They have to worry about their teachers. They have to keep a certain image with most adults in their life. So they come home with you. They know you will love them no matter what. And they are ambivalent about you for all sorts of reasons, especially because you control resources. You are the enforcer of rules. Why would they be ambivalent about you? Right? Of course, right? Wait, we're nodding heads. Of course, of course. We need to accept that because of all these factors, like one would be enough to get a bit of negativity going. Look at how many variables are going on here to over-determine that you've got a lot of negativity going on. And we haven't even talked about brain development yet. Okay? So a lot of what was attributed to raging hormones, we now know is partly related to what's going on in their brain development. How many here know about what goes on in the brain during adolescence? Oh, not that many. Oh, this is really important. Okay, well, we're going to do a little bit of a neuroscience test today. Not a test, but a review, okay? So to understand how incredibly important this research is, I have to tell you a little bit about brain anatomy, and hopefully I won't make it too boring. Okay, so there's a couple things you need to know. First, this is the prefrontal cortex. It's very young, you know, in an evolutionary sense, compared to the limbic system. So we have the thinking brain, neocortex, you know, 50 to 100,000 years old, depending on how far back you go. And then we have the emotional brain that's below that. Now, the thinking brain, we're going to call the CEO. It's a really nice, handy way. It's the executive branch. So it's in charge of planning, reasoning, weighing costs and benefits, and decision-making, and impulse control. Okay? That's the executive suite. Really important. When you think about how you want your kids to plan their time, because they've got, you know, they're going to go on a field trip in a weekend away or something for 3 days, and then they've got midterms, and they've got that research paper due. You want planning, reasoning, judgment, and impulse control, don't you? So this is super important. Don't we want those things? Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, there's a problem in that, as you'll see in a minute. Okay, so there's also the emotional part of the brain. And we're going to talk about several parts, but there are two main parts that we are going to focus on. One is fear, and one is desire. Okay? Because as we evolved as a species, both were super important, and that's why they're about 100, 200 million years old in evolutionary history. Because we had to go get food and opportunities and sex, right, to survive. And then you also had to have fear to run away from all the saber-toothed tigers, right? From all the predators. So that's why they're so primal, and that's why they're much stronger from a neurological point of view and much faster, rapid fire, faster than the thinking part of the brain. It takes about 100 milliseconds for the amygdala, the fear center, the reptile part of the brain, to respond to a perceived threat. It takes 10 times as long to go all the way through the conscious brain, right? So it's really handy that we survived as a species. That's why that's such a powerful system. However, that's the fight or flight. However, it trumps reasoning. So one of the things you read in every one of my textbooks is, in a contest, the emotional brain and circuitry always wins. Does that make sense? We don't have that many absolute principles in psychology. That's absolute. In a contest, the emotional circuitry wins. That is why when you speak in ways to your loved ones that you'd pay, I don't know, maybe $100,000 to keep it off of YouTube, you know, that way that you talk, you know how you've talked sometimes, name calling or yelling or put downs or criticism or belligerence or stone, you know, all those things, come on, you're human. All those things happen. see, I'm getting off the hook because what happened, because you don't intend to be mean to a loved one, is that you were triggered, and it triggered this fear circuit, okay? Or fight or flight. It got you mad for some reason. It wasn't an emergency, but your brain registered it that way because you felt attacked or something bad was happening. Okay, we're going to come back to that for teenagers, but that, just to know, that is a stronger. And the nucleus accumbens is the desire center. So when you know, like when I go home to my hotel tonight and I have 2 cookies that I saved, believe me, I'm going to look at those cookies. If I was in an fMRI, you know, in the brain scan, and I looked at those cookies, you'd see that part of my brain just go, ooh la la, right? So some people feel that way when they look at their favorite show on TV, or again, food, sex, warmth, all those primal things. If you really, really want it, that's what's going to light up. But when you're really, really afraid, what's going to light up is that amygdala, okay? Why did I say this? We'll get that. This is a teenager going from 5 to 20 years old. The bluing up that occurs over time has to do with the fact that we have a reversal of, and this is the big change, from gray matter to white matter, 2 to 1. So when they're little, 2 parts gray matter, 1 part white. Then by the end of adolescence, we have 2 parts white, so that's the white part. White matter is the gelatinous part that makes neurons go really, really fast. But here is the game changer right here. Okay, birth, this is all the neurons in the prefrontal cortex. Birth, 6 years old, whoa, what happened at 14? So at around about age 13, so that's like 8th grade going to 9th grade, about 40 to 50% of the prefrontal cortex is wiped out. Pretty important, right? Remember what goes on in that prefrontal cortex? Planning, reasoning, weighing costs and benefits, and decision making so that you make good choices. And then impulse control, so you can hold back bad decision making. Okay, so one easy way to put all this together is that is the NASCAR metaphor, and it might be easier than the last 5 minutes, even though you could tell I really got off on those slides, didn't I? The NASCAR metaphor is this: your kids are like hot rods, and during this period, they have, you know, they have a big engine, that's their drive for autonomy, that individuation. They've got a poor driver because they don't have as much, you know, organized neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex to direct them with that CEO. They have a poor brake system because, again, that's where you get your impulse control, is from your prefrontal cortex. And, of course, we have high-octane gas. That would be the hormones, which intensifies everything. Does that work for you, Hot Rod? Okay. So a lot of times, like, let's say, this is a classic one. The girl that, on the basketball break at 8 p.m., goes outside of Stevenson High School. She can't be found. They call the parents. Posse goes out. Oh my God, abduction. And where did they find her? Just talking to her new love interest back there in the parking lot. And then the parents said what any parent would say. What did they say? They go, everybody was looking for you. It's 9:30. You were unaccounted for. Everybody, we called the cops. And you go, what were you thinking? What is the answer? Nothing, right? She was that was a double whammy. She was highly engaged with her new love interest, and she, you know, she didn't have impulse control, and she couldn't see the consequences of her actions, right? She didn't, you know, that CEO was not engaged. So half the time we say, you know, why were you in the park sitting with other kids that were drinking beer? Of course, your kids would not drink beer, but let's just say they were sitting with kids that had beer, and they get arrested for a minor in possession. And of course, what are you going to say? You're saying, what were you thinking? Underage drinking? I'm afraid that the answer is the same as my 9th grade basketball. They probably weren't thinking about the consequences. Okay? So how do they learn? And what happens with all these little empty spaces? Well, as it turns out, the brain can grow and always does grow neurons every day, but they also connect the neurons into learning. For the rest of our lives, and it's very intensive between 13 and 25. But I just gave you some bad news, right? 13 to 20, it's a decade. So it takes a long time to build up some of those neural connections, and it's always based on learning. So when you hear about this, when your kids are in all these situations, when they can have good conversations, build up emotional intelligence, you know, good physics, good summer programming, it's delightful because here's a great, this is a tweetable right here. The neurons that fire together, wire together. The neurons that fire together, wire together. So based on stimulating curriculum and rich experiences, we build brain mass. We build that gray matter. So kids that have to be locked up in apartments because parents can't afford summer camp and they're just doing gaming, where they're going to have a lot of brain density in the gaming part of the brain. And really, depending on what you do, you're going to have different parts of your brain sort of built and with gray matter. But the kids that are underprivileged or have few opportunities are not going to grow the same brains. So this is really, really high implication stuff that we discovered in the last 20 years. Okay, so young man, go to your room and stay there until your cerebral cortex matures. This is very tempting because this would be the way that you think you might protect your child, because really this research is responsible for the risk-taking that is so endemic or intrinsic to the teenage experience. However, remember what I just said? Based on experience, yes, I'm afraid even being out at parties you don't want your children to go to, they learn things. It doesn't mean you let them go to parties. Don't worry, they'll get there anyway. You don't have to condone it. But based on when they're out there running with the pack, you know, they'll learn a lot. The problem is, I have a little joke that's hyperbole, but I think that it explains a lot of our experience as parents. Have you heard the joke about for every child you add to the group of teenagers on Saturday night, the group IQ goes down by 10 points? Isn't that good? Because one summary that I could give you on this whole brain development stuff is that during adolescence, the behavior is governed often by the emotional centers of the brain, right? The limbic system, desires and fears, and reactivity, as opposed to the thinking part of the brain, especially in high arousal situations. So even parents, when they get, you know, under the influence, or they're excited, or any of us get excited with either high happiness or high anger, we're going to be disinhibited, right? You know that alcohol does that, and anger does that. I often say, don't interact with your family under the influence of your emotions, of your extreme emotions. You know, we're all told that you shouldn't interact when we're under the influence of alcohol, but it's actually exactly the same for emotion. Don't drive your family life under the influence of extreme negative emotions, or you're going to be amygdala hijacking. That's what we call it. You're going to be reacting with your reptilian brain, and those are those YouTubes you want to like pay somebody to keep off the grid. Okay. So this is my funny little slide to make a point. All over the world, this research has been done, and in all cultures, obviously, there are cultural mediators that determine how these changes are expressed. But you will see, on average, more moodiness, more argumentativeness and reactivity, and more risk-taking. Okay? So you're going to, now you might have a real authoritarian family that's fear-based and threatens with beatings, and you can get your kids scared, and when they're around you, certain button down. And on the other hand, you know that those cultures all over the world, you read stories about, you know, the wrong kind of religion kid go off with the other kind of religion kid, and off they go. So it happens all over the world that kids have more reactivity, more risk-taking, more moodiness, and hormones. But you're still going to get a continuum because of temperament. Genes act in such a way that, you know, our kids are born with various levels of sociability, optimism, negative moods, impulsivity, adaptability. I have a big chunk in my book about, you know, if you have this kind of kid, then this is kind of the way you want to nudge, and this kind of kid, another nudging. But some of you actually have kids that got the genetic lottery. You know, they're really sunny dispositions, they're adaptable, they have just the right amount of anxiety to study a lot but not have meltdowns. Do any of you have this 10% group of easy teenagers? I see some hands. Okay, I want you to take their names because they have a lot more time for volunteer work, okay? Because life is easy for these guys. That's really nice. No, it's actually just nice. You know, some people are born with nice skin. Some people are born with, you know, trust funds. And those of us that don't have those nice things, we're in the middle, okay? So it's always nice to, you know, be lucky, but most of us are right in the middle. And then some people are unlucky, and they have kids that have high aggressiveness, impulsivity, ADHD, learning problems, and some other and then that's just really hard parenting. So, you know, we actually kind of compare each other sometimes. Oh, the soccer star, the one that went to, you know, Yale, whatever. And sometimes, no offense to you that have those superstars, but some of it is also lucky genetic combinations. It's not just the perfect parents that put out those kids that have those outcomes. So, and you know, some of my patients who have high challenge, I sit there and I marvel at what they are able to do. I mean, just because I have the credential and I write books, it doesn't mean that I actually would be a better parent than some of the parents I work with that have to go to 5 psychologists and psychiatrists. So just to disabuse you of it's all about what we do. Sometimes what comes in the package is the challenge. Okay, now, what I'd like to do for a second is just to get a little sense of the challenges that you have with your teenager. Now that I said we're all in this together, we all have challenges, I would like to get about 10 hands on what are the challenges in your family, and then we'll keep going. What's a challenge for you? What pushes your buttons with your teenagers? Yeah? Entitlement. Oh, great. I have a whole chunk on that. In fact, I call it entitlemania, you know? I'm your kid and I deserve everything. Okay, entitlement. What else? Yeah? Talking back. That's usually number one. That's why it's so nice to talk about that reactivity part, because it's just natural to be rude and talk back and all the rest. So we're going to talk about that. Yeah?
Moodiness.
Moodiness, absolutely. Little clouds that follow them everywhere. Yeah, okay, moodiness. What else? 2 hands in the back. Yes, on the right?
Swearing or cursing.
Laziness. Oh yes, if it's her idea, it's a bad idea. That's great. See, that's what's nice about that individuation. Of course, you're the big oak tree, they're a little sapling. If they cut you down, they get more sun, they get stronger. It's just biology, you know? Cut you down, cut you down, cut. Do you ever feel like you're being cut? Yeah, okay, good. I'm resonating. Yeah, was there another one? Yeah. Yes, of course, disrespect. Absolutely, they're trying to put you down on that level. And then if we react or we respond to that, sometimes we do get on that level. And that keeps us on that level, right? And that they're just picking at us, waiting for that little soft underbelly. You know, I thought as a shrink, the one I was really ready for is, I hate you. Because that's, you know, kids say that all the time. But of course, do you know what the one thing they never did to me? Either one of my kids, they never said, I hate you. I was ready for it. Like, I was ready to go, of course you do, because I'm the enforcer of their... No. They, of course, found my little soft underbelly. What do you think it was? You couldn't understand this. I'm going, what do you mean? Of course I could. And of course, you know, isn't it amazing how they find that little, you know, that little place to hook you, whether it's about academics or friends or something. So they probably found your little, you know, sweet spot, your little sensitive spot on that. Do I have more hands? Yeah. Pardon me? Self-control. Yes, if they lack the impulse control. Good, I'm going to get back to that. Did I have one over here? And then I'll continue. Okay. Yep. Okay, let me see if I'm kind of getting to it. Rude, entitled, mean, self-centered, lazy, defiant, overly dramatic, selfish, ungrateful, impulsive, indulgent, lacking in judgment, unmotivated, disrespectful, thoughtless, unreflective, dishonest. Did I get it? Should we talk about that stuff? Okay. This is what's normal in adolescence, that we find these things repugnant and difficult. And of course, if we lecture and talk about it a lot, what happens? It gets worse, of course, of course. That's the hard thing. If we do the rational thing and talk about it, we're just, of course, all attention is reinforcing. We're kind of handing them $20 bills every time we say, you know, I'm your parent and I deserve respect and I do a lot for you. And so I'd like a little bit of gratefulness. If you think about everything I did to make, I just handed them $20 bills, right? And plus, did they listen? I just want to do a shout out for how fabulous teenagers are too. They are capable of incredible generosity, kindness, creativity, physical prowess. I mean, don't we love to be around our teenagers too? It's just that the ratio is a little challenging for us in terms of when we see them in those wonderful places. And their peers, of course, see them in some of their greatest capabilities, and we're not there to see it. Okay, so let's move on to self-control. The reason why I have a whole chapter on it is more predictive of success than IQs and SATs. Did you know that? Psychologists, we invented IQs. Sorry about that. It's helpful as a predictor for sure. Intellectual ability is a big predictor, but not nearly as much as people think. You probably remember that old book written 1,000 years ago by Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence, Why It's More Important Than IQ. He describes emotional intelligence, social and emotional learning that Mark was talking about, and Illinois wants it in curriculum. Stevenson's really impactful that way, because it is a meta ability. Emotional and social strengths determine how well you use your IQ. All of us know super smart people that have been big failures in life. We know it, but we tend to focus on it so much. Self-control, okay, does everybody know the marshmallow experiment? Pretty much, I can give it in a line. Basically, 40 years ago, Walter Mischel at Stanford had this study. He was actually studying attention and distractibility, but it was one of those things that he discovered. I talk a lot about this in the book. But basically, here's a little 4-year-old, here's a marshmallow, or it could be a cookie, any treat is good. Here's one. If you can wait 15 minutes, when I come back, you'll get 2. Okay, so there are eaters and there are the waiters, right? So the ones that waited, that became a very powerful predictor, controlling for income and education of the parents. So this wasn't like hiding rich and poor or anything like that. It was just pure out, do you know how to wait? Waiting was very important, delayed gratification. So whatever it was measuring kids that can sit and listen and wait and focus, wait some more, do boring stuff, wait some more. So you can see how we call this a surrogate variable, sort of like dinners at home. You say, God, why are you always talking in public health announcements and eat dinners with your family? A surrogate variable is something that hides a lot of really special stuff inside there. So it's not just dinners at home, it's parents that organize, go through all the machinations to get that dinner on, prize nutrition, sit there even though the kids are in bad moods most of the time, and they do that. So it's holding way more information than just the family dinner. And this self-control measure of the marshmallow is not about a marshmallow. It's measuring things inside that brain that is highly predictive from a temperament standpoint for what predicts good outcome. Now, the good thing is it's buildable. It's not just your kid is made of self-controlled kid or not, because we build that muscle over time, and I'll talk about it. But just in fact, in case you think this was a one-off, there have been other studies, and a huge one that came out recently that was on 1,000 kids, again, starting in toddlerhood all the way up to the 20s. This is New Zealand, but what it shows is the people with high self-control have, or I should say low self-control, the blue, more crime, more instability, less income, more likely to be on drugs, more mental and physical problems. So it's a very, very powerful predictor. Okay, so what do we do to help them develop this? Well, we practice patience. Last Friday, I was giving a bunch of talks in adolescent medicine, and this absolutely wonderful faculty raised her hand. She was a little sheepish. She almost didn't make this point. She said, yeah, I really don't know where I am with church and my faith and stuff, but I decided to make my kids go to church every Sunday just so they had to sit there like this for 1 hour. I thought, that is cool, you know? Because really, they can't use their digital. They can't do anything. It's just practicing sitting. Isn't it amazing that she would do that? In 1940, they did a study for how long little kids could stand. Just stand. Just stand. They could stand like an hour. Do you know how long kids could stand now without their digital whatever? Or whatever. I mean, we basically don't practice patience. And back to the great comment from this gentleman, our kids get stuff to be entertained all the time, and so they're less patient than ever. We also don't have them delay gratification as much as they should. You know, I have this all the time with the clients I see. You know, they'll lose their skateboard, and then the kid will beg and say, how about Christmas, my birthday, in advance on my 5 allowances, and I need one by next week. And the parent will go, okay. And I'm going, no. What a fabulous opportunity to wait and maybe have some bake sales, whatever, but not just delivering because they're a pest, but sometimes because we have 1 or 2 kids and they're whining so much, we just give in because it's so difficult. We don't see the bigger point. Now, here's another point. Sometimes there's a big stake item and they want to borrow money from you. When they borrow money from you, or they get in advance, do you make them pay interest on that loan? Have you thought about it? Hopefully you will now. Okay, because, you know, there should actually be a tax on borrowing from you. Or you say no and they just wait and they think of other ways. Because what happens is here's the problem with entitlemania. It's that we love our children, they love their stuff, they get really antsy about wanting something, and then we give in because we can't stand the pressure and we hate to see them unhappy. And when you do buy them the Frappuccino, or then you do buy the iPhone 10, because they got to get an upgrade, you know, they're so happy, and so we just kind of melt and go with it. So some of it is our vulnerability. They need techniques for coping. We're going to talk a lot about authoritative parenting. We've got to be good managers, and we got to balance support and challenge. You know, one way to sum up good parenting is it's an ingenious balance of support and challenge. Right? So we want to challenge them in ways that should make them unhappy on a regular basis. Have you noticed? Right? If we are having them do chores on Saturday before they go out with their friends, they can have all sorts of meltdowns because, hey, it's happening. It's happening right now. They're all meeting up at the mall, 2 p.m., and it's 2:30, and they're busy having meltdowns instead of cleaning their room. So if we're playing our cards right, they should be unhappy, you know, because of our rules, not because we're yelling at them, just because we have a structure for, you know, building character, like having chores or whatever. And so, you know, we need to balance that. Now, we're going to talk in academics. Sometimes we challenge them so much and they're not capable to meet the challenge. So we can't just make up whatever challenge we want. We're trying to actually calibrate it for what we think their capability is. I think most of your teenagers are capable of cleaning up their room. I'm just kind of making a wild, crazy idea, you know, there. So why not have that come before they go out and do what they want on Saturday? And of course, we need to model our self-control. Okay, so discipline style research. This is not controversial. People talk about, you know, should you take all this stuff out of their room and then you can dole it back to them if they're misbehaving and have terrible moods. You know, if home is a war zone, your parenting isn't going to work. It needs to be mostly positive. We know that the bank account needs to be about 5 times as much positive as your negative interventions, or whatever you're doing isn't going to work anyway. But that's a qualifier. But let me describe this research, because again, it's been around for 50 years. It's been replicated all over the world. We just now have a big textbook, and it's called Authoritative Parenting. And there are hundreds of articles in there to back it up, just like the secure attachment one. So what is it? Well, it has these golden triangle, you know, 3, you know, very important ingredients: authority, warmth, and psychological autonomy. So warmth, you know, is secure attachment. Authority, you know, is rules and boundaries and structure and routines that you know, enforce and so forth. And psychological autonomy is a funny little term having to do with the fact that you respect their feelings. You're not going to try to control their feelings. If they say they hate you, that's a feeling. You're not going to make that a target of behavior. No, you know what we have on the, you need better manners, you need to do your homework, and you need to not hate me as much. You know, that usually hate in a family, because we're all so passionate in our love relationships, it's just like rain. It comes and it goes, right? It's not something you want to control. And plus, they refine some of that by 16, 17, 18. It's amazing. How many parents of juniors, seniors do I have here? A lot, good. And, you know, usually by that phase, unlike 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade, they're easing up a little bit. unless they have a lot of anxiety and a strong temperament for intense emotion. They're easing up. Have you guys noticed that? They're a little nicer. You don't have to walk 10 paces behind them if you're walking somewhere. Yeah, they laugh at your jokes sometimes. Do I have anybody acknowledging that it's a little nicer by junior, senior year? Yeah, we actually call that rapprochement. It's in the textbooks going back 80 years. That, when they kind of grow into their skin and personality a little and they mature, they have more frontal lobe going on, they actually control themselves a little bit more. But early, in middle school and early high school, you're going to get a lot of negative emotions. And we recommend you don't try to control them, that you accept that. You expect some refining of that expression later on in most cases. But thoughts are the same way. If your child says, I'm an atheist one day, you might really get mad, but you could say, tell me about that, rather than trying to control that they've now announced that they're a goth, or they're a this, or they're that. You could say, tell me about that, or what are your belief systems, or I really recommend Socratic method. I have a whole section on Socratic method, like being as good as the teachers at Stevenson. You could say, what would happen with this, if you're now an anarchist, what would happen if there was not a rule of law, that's interesting, what would you do? Just ask about it. You don't have to say, that's the craziest thing I ever heard, because then you're in a big war about a philosophy, or about politics or religion. Given that we want to stay mostly positive, you want a whole bunch of stuff that you don't go after, because we have a lot on our list that we want to go after, like bedtime and homeworks, expectations and grades and so forth. Okay, so if you have a lot of authority but not enough warmth and respect for thoughts and feelings, and that's called the authoritarian parent camp. Command and control, I tell you what to do and you go do it, and the kid says, can I have a vote on what my chores are? And you go, no, I'm the boss of this place. So they don't like input. Authoritarian parents just want to say, I want it to go the way it did in the 1950s, where I'm the boss and you just do it. You can do that, and you'll get more obedience without any question. Fear, induction, love withdrawal, threatening, a bunch of negative consequences, and following through. You would absolutely get less back talk, no doubt about it. But you also won't have as much closeness. Your children will come to you when the chips are down and seek your opinion on important matters. So it's a sacrifice. You can absolutely get that kind of obedience across the board if you want. More substance abuse, a lot of bad outcome with authoritarian parents. A lot of not so great outcome with permissive parents. Those are the parents that want to talk and talk and talk some more about feelings and how you feel, and please won't you do your chores, and couldn't you do your chores, and I need you to do your chores. And they just so much don't want to have the boom drop on a consequence for non-compliance that they end up really lacking authority, and they have not so great outcomes. And the other one would be, if you're not attending to all three of these things in the magic package, you could get indulgent kids or neglected kids with more negative outcomes. So you really want to consider these three strengths as part of a mighty stool. Now, just to break things up, I'll give you a little. What I do in the book is have what I call Cosmo quizzes. Like those stupid things in Cosmo magazines. How sexy are you? And are you ready for college? And all those stupid things. So this is quick and dirty. This is not psychometric testing here. I have to have a qualifier since I'm a PhD. So typical things that you do if you have these strengths would be you practice thoughtful discipline, make expectations clear, avoid threats and overtalk. For warmth, make sure that you keep that ratio going, prioritize for a lot of time for a lot of family fun, express affection. And this one, of course, is listening and validating feelings, not trying to get rid of negative emotions, negotiating policies when possible, and not trying to control thoughts and feelings. So, if you have 9 of those, you're really, really strong on authoritative parenting. You're probably a very effective parent. Okay, we're going to just hopscotch through some other areas here. Is this how you get to Yale? Just okay, that father's a little hopeful, I think. You saw this slide before, and I want to go back to it because, again, the relationship between parent and child is all important. What do you think that green dot was, and why do I want to talk about it? Well, let's say it's college admissions, what I call the tail wagging the dog. One of the problems, especially in high schools like this, which is, really fine high school. I've heard people move to this part of Chicago so they can go to this high school. That's what my parents did every time we moved, New York and Houston. What's the Stevenson High School? We're going to move there. Which is great because you have a fabulous curriculum and a fabulous student body for, positive and ambitious goals and so forth. But what happens with a competitive gene pool like this is you get the tail wagging the dog. The parents talk about college, the kids talk about college, they're all talking about APs. And when you think about the variance accounted for by that whole pie, that's supposed to be a dot. But sometimes, what I mean by tail wagging the dog is like things get too focused on one thing, and then we lose the focus on all those other things I've just talked about. And then you're afraid of this. Everybody's afraid that if their kid isn't hearing about SATs, SAT preps, that somehow there's just, if you don't lay it on big time all the time, there's only one other outcome, and that's going to be homeless, There's a lot in between, you can lay off a little bit. And Mark will tell you all about it later on. I'm just going to refer you to the brain trust here. Okay, so learning, as it turns out, curiosity is absolutely hardwired in our species. And if you look at a squirrel or a dog or a cat, they're curious too, because being curious is how you find opportunities, right? It's entertaining to find that little spool of yarn for the cat, but it's also how you follow your nose to other things and opportunities in survival. The thing about learning is every kid is set up to be a good learner. It's just that it gets stamped out a little bit here and there for some learners as they grow up because they haven't been successful. So this is the total sweet spot for learning. Enough challenge to stretch their competence, rewards along the way. I don't mean like goodies, I mean rewards like intrinsic mastery and gratification. And scaffolding when failing leads to goals. Now, does anybody notice this is what is now called gamification? Because this is what computer games are absolutely brilliant at. It's called intermittent reinforcement. You just watch your kids. Some of you actually play a little bit of Candy Crush. I know you're out there. Angry Birds before that, and then Candy Crush won you over, right? I know. Okay, so what happens is, I want it, it's fun, you're doing all this engagement, you get the goodies, and then all of a sudden you're not getting goodies, and then they can sell you extra goodies, or you can go online and find out how to get there. It's just hunt, opportunity, and get. So, unfortunately, the way school works, especially physics and biology and some other and for many kids writing research papers or essays on the crucible, it's not as, the dopamine for learning is not delivered as consistently, so learning stops being fun. And that's unfortunate, it's the way it goes. So actually this group education we have is a lot of hope that we can kind of have masterful teachers deliver it in enough ways and find out how to catch that place where they are and move them up. And it's really challenging. But I want you to remember, every kid likes to learn. We just have to pitch it to where they are, which is probably why so many kids end up with tutors. Okay, we're going to end up with, we're going to start a little skit because you're tired of a lecture. Let's see this come alive. So I have two volunteers, Mark and Beth Hannah. Thank you. They're going to bring this alive. This is Patrick. I think there are two mics somewhere. Are they around here? Or maybe this one could go live. Oh, there they are. Oh, no. They can't hear you. They're coming. Okay, so I'll tell you what's happening. We've got one right there, and we'll get another. Okay, so what happened was, Mom, Beth Hannah here, was worried about Mark's grades, and he went online. Do you have an online? What do you call the online thing where you look online? When you look online to see your kids' grades? What do you call it? It's different at every high school. Infinite Campus. So she said, oh my gosh, I had so much work for the last 2 months. I think I should go on Infinite Campus. Is that right? Okay, and this is 9th grade, and Patrick was kind of underachieving in 8th grade, but this is 9th grade, and he said, Mom, I can handle it. I'm in 8th grade. Just get off my back, I'll handle it. Have you ever heard that? Trust me, I'll handle it. Now I'm getting the nodding heads for sure. Okay, so then she went on one night, and she finds out he's got 2 Ds. She is freaking out. She goes in, stealth bomber. She goes in, takes his laptop, then she looks at the history and finds out he's been lying and deceiving. He's been playing Warcraft the entire time he said he was doing homework for the last 2 months. So she is raring mad. Got the setting? Gaming, lying, cheating, deceiving. Got it? Okay. Just a little bit mad.
We got it?
You can share.
Patrick, I looked at your laptop history and found out you've been deceiving me for weeks. You've been saying you're doing your homework, but instead you've been playing Warcraft.
Warcraft? It's called Warcraft, Mom. I can't believe you turned into a snoop. And by the way, the teachers are lying, Mom. They haven't counted stuff I've turned in. Settle down, I'll handle it. Trust me.
Patrick, is this working? Yeah. Patrick, you need to take school seriously. Education is an important part of your future. Constant gaming is bad for you. We need to pull the plug on it.
Mom, you're overreacting. I'm doing fine at school. School is overrated and boring. My gaming skills are going to get me farther than school stuff anyway.
Patrick, you're deluded. I can't trust you at all. You know that you're a gaming addict, right? You're never going to get into college with grades like this.
And who wants to go to college? You're obsessed, Mom. And you are stressing me out, and I hate living here, and you are ruining my life.
And you are utterly irresponsible. I'm shutting down your gaming. You're grounded until you pull your grades up.
I'll show you. I'll flunk all my classes. You are the worst mother ever. I ever had. The worst mother that ever lived.
Lesbians. Absolutely. I know. Absolutely. Okay, so what went wrong there? What should Mom have done differently? Any ideas? Oh, come on. You couldn't tell what went wrong? She was mad. She wanted to open up the subject. What did she do? Yeah, she yelled. She started with an attack. So here's another tweetable for my Twitter expert. Get it? You might be right, but are you effective? Hashtag that. Hashtag comes first, right? Yeah, I like to say that because, I've seen so many gags on hashtag. So when you have the moral high ground, like your child just got the minor in possession, or, lied about the gaming instead of doing homework, or you found out they did a prank and, they did some graffiti and they're really in trouble about it. You might be absolutely right that they shouldn't have done that, right? But so what? If you start with an attack, you're not going to open it up and get problem solving, or certainly any inspiration for mending or doing reparation, right? So we really have to watch it. That was called an amygdala hijack for the mom. She was flooding, right? Like there's a saber-toothed tiger out of her, and it's Patrick's failure, that's right before her eyes. Everything is evaporating, all her hopes for Patrick. And so she's triggered, and then she's flooding in the emotional part of her brain, right? So if we had her in an fMRI, we would have that whole part lit up right below the eyeballs, in the amygdala. And we'd say, whoa, she's hijacked. Her brain is reacting like she saw a fire, or she saw a tiger, or that, a car just came into the intersection and is about to crash. That's what her brain looks like. Does that make sense? That's why we act in ways that are completely ineffective. We might be right, but are we effective? Okay, so there's a whole way we're going to slow down, but I want you to see all the buttons she has, because this obviously came from my practice, and I pretty much did it broke. School failure, lying, cheating on the rules, deception, laziness, he'll never go to college, addiction to Warcraft, resentment of dad who says, oh, it's just a stage, anger at the school who didn't contact her. You know, she's got some sort of magical thinking that teachers should be calling her all the time. Humiliation. Her sister's the kids make straight A's. And self-loathing. I'm a bad mother. Right? We can relate to that. This is perfectly understandable that she was triggered. She was triggered, and therefore she wasn't exactly, clear-headed in how she approached the problem. In fact, she looked a little bit like this, didn't she? You know this joke, don't you? Stay out of the garbage, Ginger, stay out of the garbage. And how many times are you lecturing at your kid, and you just know that their eyes are glazed over, and they're thinking, blah, blah, Patrick, blah, blah, Patrick, right? I remember actually, I was in a phase where my father was taking me to the garage and saying in 5th grade, he said, Laura, tell me all the ways you thought before you acted today. And he was talking about, in life you need to think and reflect before you make choices. And I remember just kind of going, blah, blah, Laura, blah, blah. You guys did have childhoods, didn't you? Just checking. There's a pulse. Sometimes we're coming at this parenting thing and it's acting like we didn't go through the same thing. So actually, with Patrick's mother, Patrick, there's not much effectiveness going on there. And so a really good little protocol you can, I got this, I have to say, completely honestly, I love working with people in AA because they bring me all their slogans and I can rip them off. They are fabulous. Easy does it, one day at a time. This one is WAIT, wait, do you know what it means? Why am I talking? Isn't it good? You need to remember that. Right? Because there are all these times where we're lecturing and talking, and we know we're sitting there, and it's not working with our teenager. You can't go to the kegger because you're underage, and the kegger, is going to have maybe unseemly things happen, and bad things can happen at the kegger. You're going to talk your kid into not wanting to go to a kegger? Are you kidding me? It's blah blah Patrick on that one too. So it's ineffective. You can say no, and they can blow up, and you can say, I'm sorry you're sad about it. I understand perfectly well who wouldn't want to go to a fun kegger. I'm still saying no, but I can be incredibly empathic that you think I'm the meanest person in the world because you want to go to this cool party in a really cool park and upperclassmen, and it sounds wonderful, and I'm still saying no, right? So you don't need to go on and on about it. They know it's illegal. I think most of your kids know that drinking underage is okay. Just checking. I mean, so often we just go on with blah, blah, gender. It's amazing. And we need to have the duct tape school of parenting occur to us at that time. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what wise-minded parenting is. It's a concept, actually. It's not just a nice little title. And it comes from dialectical behavior therapy, which is, all over the world, a very, very famous new sort of, you've heard of behaviorism, you've heard of attachment parenting. This is actually evidence-based research on an approach to problem solving that is quite important. You all know that if you go to Harvard or Stanford business, you're all going to learn about emotional regulation. It's like even the people not in psychology are all on, you must stay emotionally regulated to be good leaders. So this is the next sequel to emotional regulation, is Wise Mind. And now I'm going to explain it. What it means, and then we'll get back to Patrick's mom. Okay, so what it means is you're using the best of your cognitive skills with the best of your emotional skills to come up with good decision making. So what it is you're going to control your emotions, because if you're flooding, you can't think. You're not going to be in your prefrontal cortex. And if you lead with just reasonable things, like lecturing Patrick about how you're right and he's wrong, that doesn't work either, right? So even reasoning can be overrated, and you've noticed that at work when you tell your coworkers, I'm right about my idea and you're wrong. Does that work? Doesn't work with teenagers, doesn't work with your wife or your husband or your coworker. So reason skills can be overrated too. You want to combine them, and I'll show you. But first we're going to talk about the dialectic of change, because with loved ones, and actually with your coworkers, you need to always start with acceptance and connecting, right? We connect before we correct, okay? We accept before we change. Because just to say to Patrick, look, here's the litany of things you did wrong, you need to change. Is Patrick going to change and start doing a lot of homework? No way. No way. That's not going to happen. And most of us, what we need to change some habit or another. More exercise, less alcohol, more sleep, less digital. All of us need to change something, I would imagine, unless you're deluded. Total denial. Most of us need to change something. But if somebody just yelled at us about, you need to change, that's not very inspirational, right? So it just makes sense. We got to start with a bedrock of acceptance. So right there, always think of weighting it toward empathy and connecting with your loved one before you start about you need to change. Okay, so another wonderful phrase. We just invented this new word tonight, tweetable. Here's another one. My child is doing the best he can given his emotional state, and he needs to do better. Okay, so see, a dialectical, you remember that from, philosophy in college, if you took it. Dialectical means by examining opposing truths, you get closer to understanding a concept. So by understanding that you need acceptance, weighted toward acceptance, and then you want some change ideas, you're going to get closer to whatever you're trying to do with your child, okay? Or in decision-making at work as well. My child is doing the best he can, given his emotional state, and his temperament, and his developmental situation. All these things I need to consider, and he needs to change. Okay, so there are two big errors that happen. If you're blowing it with your loved one, notice how I slip in loved ones? Because you're going home with spousal therapy tonight, not just working with your teenager. I hope you're thinking about applying them. Okay, so there are two big errors you can make with high emotion situations, difficult situations. One is with your excessive emotion flooding, and the other is excessive reason arguing, okay? So let's talk about how this happens. I already showed you this concept, but you're seeing it here. See, right here, you see something scary, like Patrick is failing. I looked at Infinite Campus, and she was flooding then, and then she flooded again when she saw the gaming history on his laptop. And it went right through to here, and then it went to the thalamus, and it just said, emergency. And what happens, release of adrenaline, the fight and flight hormone that said, oh my God, I'm going to battle. And if she's thinking through things and reflecting, she's going to activate neural connections in the blue. So that's blue-red. This book that's, a bestseller right on the market today, Thinking Fast and Slow by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. It's all about this. It's very dense. You might not like it. But basically, Daniel Kahneman says, okay, guys, this is system one, super strong and fast. This is system two, slower. So everything you're thinking right now is the slow lane. Okay, so Patrick's mom is in the fast lane. Okay, so operating under the influence of emotion and the amygdala hijack, not recommended. Okay, another way of looking at this is when our emotional systems are hijacked like that, we have a cognitive narrowing. We literally scope down to, Patrick is a failure, oh my God. See, remember my list of triggers? Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. You're only thinking one thing. There have been really interesting studies these days. There was one that was done with seminarians, and they said, okay, we're in this situation, this is an experiment, okay? So they were given this, this competitive problem to solve. And then right in the middle of telling them about it, they said, oh, you need to go over to that other building. Notice they did it with seminarians. You're supposed to go, oh, people that are going into priesthood or ministers, like ultra good people. That's the way they're supposed to be thinking. Really good people. And then they were running over to this other place to finish the problem set. And you know what happened? There was somebody struggling out of a wheelchair, and they didn't even see him. And we wouldn't see them either. And when we're in a rush on the way to work, we probably don't see other people that need help either. It's not our fault. We're flooding. We actually have a scope down, visual scope down, and we don't see out here. And it's a metaphor, right? Because we're seeing things out of perspective. Only that Patrick is a dirty dog, not that there are other things going on. Okay? So all that list of triggers is all she's thinking about. She's only thinking Patrick lies, cheats, and fails. She can't see in the weeds. This is what losers like me do on Saturday night. We go on Google Media, we just download stuff, and we make little pictures, and then right in the middle of my picture, I go, oh, I can put these thoughts in the weeds, which is where they are. That's a metaphor. Okay, Patrick is good with children. Patrick is generous and funny. Patrick is a good friend. Patrick loves animals, and the list goes on. I love Patrick, he loves me. You forget all these things about your teenager, and then you pounce on him like he's a predator. Have I sort of made that dramatically clear? I think so. Okay, so the other thing, Patrick's mom could be as calm as can be. We have a completely different scenario. Mom took, 10, mental Valiums, she's chilled out. But she could make another big error. She could go in there and say, school's important, of course you want to go to college, you need to make good grades. If you make 1C, you can't get into University of Illinois. And we don't have that much money, and I told you that in 5th grade, and I'd like for you to get a merit scholarship. She could be completely controlled, but really blow it with excess of lecture and reason mind, right? And the way we do this, we always do this in the same way. I'm right, you're wrong, I've got it in perspective, you don't. I have wisdom on my side, you don't. That's how we sort of divide up with some of this judgment taking over stuff. So let's talk about what we want to do instead. First you want, I use this term from my last book, Getting to Calm. And then I have 14 of the biggest hot button issues and sort of go through how you solve a problem with it. But I think that like firefighters and like police officers, we need protocols in emergency situations so that we don't go in and sort of rush to doing a Patrick Mom thing. So cool down, you see I have my little C-A-L-M. Cool down, assess your options. First, when you start to talk to your teenager about the kegger, about the MIP, about the failing grades, anything, it's very counter to your nature because you're worried, but you want to start with empathy. You're thinking, what do you mean empathy? You just got arrested. Yes, I mean empathy. He's probably very nervous that he got an MIP, or he's very nervous that he's flunking. Always start with empathy, okay? We're going to talk about that more in a minute. And then, of course, when you assess options, the coolest thing, well, let me just start back on the cooling down. When you're flooding and you deep breathe, I've got lots of breathing exercises in the book. You could do, I'm going to breathe in for 4 seconds, I'm going to hold on for 4 seconds, I'm going to exhale over 4 seconds, rest. Do that for 2 minutes. That's not asking much, 2 minutes. And there's a likelihood that your heart rate will be under 100 beats a minute, and then you can think. So anytime, my supervisor in my first year at graduate school said, Laura, there are very few emergencies. And it's true. There might be a fire, there might be a toddler that runs in the street, but with your teenagers, you always have time, unless somebody just kidnapped them to Wisconsin. I think, there are very few emergencies. Take time to get your heart rate down so that you can use your prefrontal cortex, which is where your CEO is, okay? This is science. So there's a lot of joking, like when people are upset to say, look, breathe, breathe. And it's so weird, and mindfulness is not as popular as it should be. It's a physiological reality that we've got to get that heart rate down before we can access our PFC, our CEO, our prefrontal cortex. Now, the other super cool thing is, if you are deliberating, let's say Patrick's mother starts to go, Patrick, I did this, and they start back to it, she goes, oh, I am good for nothing. We got to reset, reboot. I'm going to go in the bathroom and do my yoga by breathing, whatever. The minute she says, okay, I'm going to have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. If you are evaluating 2, 3 options, you are absolutely in your prefrontal cortex. You can't evaluate things. It's too complicated unless you're in there. Isn't that cool? So if you do this, you will be in your prefrontal cortex. If you are saying, okay, I'm supposed to evaluate options, but all I can think about is he's going to be on the street because he didn't take his SATs, then if you're not evaluating. So calm down and then say, should I call my sister? Should I call the school? Should I wait until tonight? You got lots of options. Evaluate them and you won't go into the rush to hijack it. Listen with empathy and then make the plan. Okay, what is the plan? Let's move on. Don't just first, a good little, self-soothing slogan is don't just do something, stand there. Because we're used to thinking emergency, hop on it, right? You want to filter out being right. Don't lead with excessive judgment, too much logic. You might be right, but are you effective? We talked about that. And then you want to figure out realistic goals, effective problem solving, and what feels right for you. Because your sister might say, oh, absolutely ground him for 3 months and take away his stuff. And you're going, something about that just doesn't feel quite right. He already hates me. And he said to me, if I did that, he'd wait till I see that, he'll make, X and everything. I'm not sure taking away everything. Remember that pie? It shouldn't all be about punishment. Maybe call the school, maybe get an appointment. So, you might get advice, but you can cognitively analyze and see what feels right for you. And a lot of people say you need to get Patrick calm down, you want him to be more appreciative. You can't control Patrick. The only person you can control is yourself. So you want to go to that interaction with, as good a set of skills as possible. Okay, so validation does not mean approval or agreement. It's a very hard skill to practice when you think your kid is a dirty dog, granted, okay? So you sometimes even have to think about how does he see it from some point of view? Because I need to just match it. Of course I think he's wrong about college doesn't matter, grades don't matter, gaming skills are going to get him farther in life. I don't agree. So you don't deal with, validating is, yes, gaming skills will get, it's not about agreement, it's about, look, Patrick, you are in hot water, I understand, we got to figure this out. He can keep screaming, but if you keep saying, I know you're in hot water, this isn't fun for you either, you're at least getting close to his experience so that there might be the beginning of a bridge between you. Okay, so we know that she probably wants to apologize. I hope we're that far. In terms of goals, let's say she's blown it. He's gone off to school. She wants a reset, reboot. She wants to make amends. She wants to get a bridge made, right? So I could crowd share this, but to be efficient, I think we'd probably come up with something like apologize, try to bond over their mutual vulnerable feelings, and maybe get set on some problem solving. So I'm just going to give you one version of this, which actually did happen with a parent, I'm happy to say, and I love how she made out. You could tell she was doing her work. So she said, Mom says, I'm sorry I blew up earlier, I was really worried about you. Patrick says, I can't believe you crept in and snooped like that, you're disgusting. Mom says, yeah, I know. What we do for love. Little humor there. I'm not proud of it. Look, I know you're really suffering, Patrick. Yeah, well, leave me alone then. I'll fix it. You make things worse. You're a control freak. I made an appointment at school so that we can help you catch up without being overwhelmed. I'm on your side, Patrick. What? You had no right. You suck. You're going to ground me and shut down my gaming, aren't you? And she said, ground you? No. You need to be happy to work hard. We'll just make sure you get the work done before you game. Okay, pretty pedestrian looking, but I'm going to tell you why I think this is brilliant. Then he says, great, now my mom is a homework warrior. Oh, I had another one. I'm also the master of foot rubs. Want one? So see, ending with something kindly. Okay, now, notice how many times he is spouting off. So, you're disgusting, you make things worse, you're a control freak, you suck. We don't like that language, of course. You're a warden. Now, what happens is mom is going in there saying, I'm going to make a bridge, I'm going to be empathic, and I'm going to stick to the program. My program is to inform him that while he was at school, I already called school. Note to self, you don't need permission to talk to other people's parents and to call the school. In fact, I recommend when there's some hot water, make those actions ahead of time so that you don't have an argument about whether you have a right to call another adult. You always have a right to call another adult. Okay, can we just make that tribal agreement? Elders in the tribe get to talk to each other. It's amazing how much power we give kids sometimes, And then that's one whole thing over with. I called the school, we made an appointment. The school really cares about you too. They want to help you figure out a schedule for digging out, right? That's done. We don't have he will pull, if she hadn't done that, he would pull out all his magic tricks for freaking her out because he's so humiliated that he'd go to the school and have to talk to people about what he feels so terrible about. So she's stuck to the business. I'm on your side. I know you're suffering. I want to help you. We'll do this together. And of course, there's going to be restrictions on electronic. So she actually slips in some pretty bad news here, right? Which is, yes, electronics will be restricted. First you do your work, then you'll get to play. But she doesn't want to make him unhappy. It's going to be controlled. But for Patrick, who thought he was going to be, in the doghouse forever, and that she was going to cancel all gaming, which, is another option. I'm not saying it wouldn't be an option, but she just decided to do this one. So this was a very successful makeup. That's the great thing about human relations, If you really blow it, you get to do another wonderful parenting skill, which is apologize. Isn't that great? Because you want them to learn that skill when they were a little bit hot under the collar with their employer or with their girlfriend, boyfriend. You want them to learn to say, I blew it, I'm sorry. Can we kind of redo that? I really regret that. I want to tell you that I understand you're feeling badly, or that I did not do well in that interchange. You want them to learn that. So this is an opportunity to teach them the skill of, I regret how I interacted with you, right? Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of social emotional, and then we're going to have Q&A. Okay, just for fun, we're going to have a true and false test. So you get to shout out true or false. I'm going to have 5 things on social intelligence here. Okay, social cruelty is normative, bullying is pathology. Is that true or false? Yes, it's true. We have mixed up the terms. We now use the word bullying for everything. Social cruelty is absolutely normal. Not attractive, not good. That's what socialization is about. We're trying to teach them kindness and to not be cruel. But cruelness in one way or another is part of schooling. And then that's part of our socialization, is to teach and encourage empathy. But to lie to a friend about saying, no, I'm busy so you can go to this better thing, unfortunately, hate to tell you, normal. Not good, but when you treat them as they're derelict, horrible people, when they do these things, it's not bridge making. You can say, I know that's really tempting, but it's not right. What do you want to do about it? We need to reserve the word bully for something pretty bad. A tormenting bully, it means that there's a differential in power or age. It means a pattern. It's intense. It really means suffering. So, use the word cruel or mean, but save bully for something pretty important, because we're throwing that word around, and then, when we are exaggerating, we have less credibility. The desire to belong and to be like peers drives conformity more than peer pressure. True or false? Absolutely true. We constantly talk about peer pressure. Peer pressure happens in a problematic way. Ask your kids, it can happen. It can be like, try this, try that, with drugs or whatever, sure. And that's what we're always focusing on, but mainly when they want to dress a certain way or adopt a certain taste in bands, or, they learned about atheism or anarchism. It's not about peer pressure. It's about there's some allure, something interesting, and they're drawn to it. But we don't like to think about that in our child, so we just blame peers for just about everything. And really what's interesting too is how many good things happen from peer influence from children. I get to see the text threads of some of the things that people hear from their peers, and they're fabulous. You just don't see them because they're not telling you about all their nasty deeds. So they don't want you to know how bad they've been, and then like let's say they're doing some sexting, which is of course terrible and horrible and illegal, right? I've seen more than one text stream where all of her friends are saying, don't do this, it's wrong, you're going to be in trouble, you should value yourself more than this. I'm going, perfect, do what they said. I'm actually encouraging some of the peer influence. It's amazing, but you don't hear about the positive peer influence sometimes, which is really sad, because then they keep getting this bad reputation. I'm not saying that evil things don't come from peers, it's just we've overrated that. Okay, bad-mouthing peers creates the Romeo and Juliet effect, which I think you know what that is. When you badmouth Romeo, has he become more attractive? Yeah. So you need to know that whoever your kids' friends are, even if they're unsavory and you're trying to sort of maneuver and engineer them away from those peers, if you just outright badmouth them, they're probably going to even get closer to them in loyalty. It's very natural if you say, I don't like his manners, the way he treats me, the way he treats you, or I've heard these things about he's a pothead. It's understandable that you would try to discourage, but again, think ahead. If they've chosen them, bad-mouthing them is actually probably going to take away some of your credibility, and then you're going to find out less. So just, keep your mouth shut about what you think. If you've heard gossip, they're only going to call you a gossiper. It's not going to help your influence. You probably want to do some more indirect things. I have a whole bunch on that in the book too. By high school, most teens don't necessarily want to be friends with popular kids. True. Did you know that? In middle school, anybody wants to be friends with the popular kids, but there's a lot of research now that by high school, it's sort of like any primate group, to maintain that popular status, and keep that power. A lot of unattractive things happen. And so who wants to be close to them? They'll trash me like they trash that beta person in their group. So I'm not saying that they don't want to be pi. It's just not an automatic. And that's a beautiful thing of socialization, social skill development. They start to watch the habits of particular people, and instead of just, I wanted that friend because he plays soccer and I play soccer, or I want to, be with him because he has the same interest in chess. They start to say, I want to be with that person because I like some of their personality traits or their virtues. So they get much more discriminating, which is a beautiful thing to see. Overstating social dangers results in lower parent credibility. True. To just sit around and say, pot, oh my gosh, ridiculous states like Washington State legalized. Pot is evil, it's a gateway drug, you'll be on heroin before you know it. Not recommended, right? There's a reason why it's being legalized. I mean, it's much safer than alcohol in the end. I, of course, would prefer to have neither in the life of the teenager, given the effects on the teenage brain and how quickly they can become addicted. But again, just going off about the evils of this and that and the other is basically going to build more distance. These are mothers without borders. There are fathers without borders too. Shouldn't you be studying? With grades like this, you'll never get into college. I only tell you to lose weight because I love you. You're planning to go out looking like that? I mean, most of us have made a couple of those errors, especially the one you're going to go out looking like that right here. Sometimes you just think, and a little of this, of course, we only have to be good enough, but of course, we want to be more effective when we've got our prefrontal cortex working. Okay, this is my endorsement on putting a value on mental health. A week ago I did a talk like this, and I started with this slide and went forward. I only talked about mental health. It's way underrated, you guys. If you could shave a couple of IQ points off and have really good mental health, no stressing out, anxiety, depression, believe me, you'd want to take up that deal. Because the more they have mental health, then they're being insulated from stressing out. And stress is very common. Stress can be good. This is one of my favorite slides. You can see here that, passivity, boredom, a little bit of adrenaline allows us to be more effective, whether we're at work or taking the SAT or going out for a basketball tournament, getting all revved up with your favorite playlist and all that. And that's the sympathetic nervous system. This is the parasympathetic nervous system. And, the parasympathetic is what calms us down. Let's say if you had a really good vagal tone, you'd be over here and you'd start to breathe deeply and say, hey, I just got to get through this test, I'll be fine, and then you could back it up. But sometimes when you start to flood, you get worse and worse and worse, and then you get into brain lock here and you can't think. That's why so many schools are starting to have mindfulness as part of their health education, because they want kids to learn how to regulate their emotions and calm down when they're stressing out. So energized on the way up, and that's a good thing, but then when you get the overload and you don't know how to regulate your emotions, you get into the brain lock over here. Okay, so this is, if you're in constant amygdala hijack, your brain is tricked into thinking that there's predators after you all the time, and you're worrying about school and your friends and your future and getting into college, you're a basket case, right? And your organ systems are all going to be affected by that too. And this is a little diagram of that. So, when you have constant stressing out, it affects everything from chronic illness to, gut pain to headaches and all the rest. The only answer for all of us that are living in modern society and getting stressed out with commuter traffic and money problems and worried about climate change and all the rest is to figure out ways that we can regulate our emotions, calm that system, and that's why this focus on mindfulness or breathing or anything you do to calm your system down is so important. So whatever we do here, connecting to other people and talking, probably now we're documenting why therapy has always worked, we just didn't know why, is that we're going from our limbic system, okay, and putting feelings into words, which means we're taking it from the stressing out adrenaline system and we're putting it into sentences that require prefrontal cortex. And then we get affirmation. We're looking at a sympathetic face. It could be kind parents. Of course, ideally, it would be kind parents and friends. Then there's that affirmation, there's that brain looping of affirmation, and then oxytocin is released, which is, we call it the tend and befriend hormone. Feeling good because you have connection. That calms you down. Okay, so we've got breathing, we've got yoga, meditation, and hopefully we have loving parents and loving interactions with friends that also calm us down. Sometimes they rev us up. That's unfortunate. You might be from the colicky family, okay? We're all kind of stressed out too at the end of our day. You work hard, you're in commuter traffic, you've got all sorts of problems. So when kids come home to this, unfortunately, they may get worse, not better. This actually happened to me. You know, you're always looking at ways to just have a little more. I can remember just sort of singing along, dancing while I was washing dishes, and my daughter said, "Mom, you're hurting me." So sometimes, I happen to think that if you're singing and you're a little nerdy and ridiculous, and you and your spouse are enjoying some news or some funny story, and they think you're disgusting, I think it's okay. Because we know brains are open Wi-Fi systems, and if they're around good karma, even if they say you're disgusting and most of your music taste and your singing and your dancing and your jokes are all ridiculous, I say it's okay. Positive karma is the soup that we want them to swim in, and whatever efforts you make to do that, I say are fair game. So any way that you inject these positive emotions are going to be good. Go after it any way you can. Okay, I'm just one endorsement on after school activities because I want the rest of the time on questions. The overscheduled child syndrome is overrated. Okay, it's a myth. Thank goodness, you get a trendy little hot sensational item out, and people go, "Oh, they ever got." Now there are some kids overscheduled. I'm a clinical psychologist. I see those kids that are anorexic and in 5 dance troops and SAT prep and all that. Yes, it exists. It's in this many, okay, a slice of kids. Most kids, 50% of American kids are in no activities. And to be in some, mostly kids are thriving because they're so helpful to building self-esteem in other areas that aren't academics. They're around really positive role models among the adults that supervise. They're around pro-social peers because peers that have high character are the ones that do scouts, do orchestra, do sports, do service. So you're just, automatically sampling that. And most premarital sex, drug activity, bad driving, risk-taking, you name it, is happening between 3:30 and 6:30. So it's an automatic way that you're in something positive that's incompatible with risk-taking. So I'd say some of you may be guilty of overscheduled. You can be your own judge. But if you're parents of middle schoolers and your kids are starting into what I call the I don't wanna years, I don't wanna, you could say, gosh, you get to choose what you do, what sport, what service, but not whether you do it. Family rule. You have many family rules, like brushing teeth, going to the dentist, coming home, going to bed. Make a family rule. You get to choose what, but not whether. You need to do these things. So I'm always trying to hit that hard with middle schoolers. By high school, it's hard to get in an argument if you're already into a negative pattern around not letting it. We want you to have fun as long as it's fun that enhances a college admission application. Don't ever say this, okay? Very cynical. This is not about being pre-college. It's about child development and what enhances character, what enhances health. So you as a parent can be very authoritative and say, yes, you're going to go to camp, or you're going to be a counselor and trainer, or yes, you're going to get a job. All those things that happen to be good for a college education. But you don't need to say that. You say it's good for your health. It's good for your development. It's why I take you to the dentist. Okay, it's why I took you to Little League, right? It's my job to supply a healthy meal, to supply a healthy schedule. You get to choose what. I'm not into ultimate frisbee, but go for it. There are so many wonderful things about ultimate frisbee, right? So you don't have to get all, designer parenting about it, but you're doing it because it's healthy. Okay, so again, there's lots of things that go along with physical health, fair game for the Q&A. I'll let you choose that. But of course, technology control is really part of everybody's biggest dilemma these days with teenagers because you can get drunk on media. It keeps me from looking at my phone every 2 seconds. This is called a default, right? The cone head is preventing you from doing what you don't want to do. So a default setting is very good for all of us. We set our thermostats to go down at night, down when we're gone during the day. We set up 401ks so our money disappears, right, into finance. That's what we do, right? Good financing. And talk to people from our sponsors. And we set up systems like that so that we can ensure that we do the right thing. Because again, remember what I told you about our brains that are sometimes weak to certain desires, and like spending money, or drinking too much, or staying up too much, or doing too much digital, is teenagers are really vulnerable because of their brain remodeling and their hormones and their wanting to connect with the second tribe, their peers. We're vulnerable too. If we're having as much trouble controlling our digital diet, imagine what teens with these. So the idea that would say, here, take this smart thing and take this laptop and make good decisions is a little naive. And that's why Patrick, with some of his issues, really needs to actually have that more controlled so that he can be set up with his cone head, i.e. his mother's supervision. And what we do with failing kids, if we don't have that many options, right? Because everything's digital. So we either have them download material and go offline and pull the router so they can't do ESPN and Warcraft and everything else, or that they have a parent or somebody sitting with them. There are only two options. Otherwise, Patrick's brain is set up reward, reward, reward. And many of your kids are as well. Now, if I were to say the main thing that's happening for most high schoolers, or what I hear from parents is, oh, they're 7-8 hours doing homework. Well, they're not actually doing homework for 6 hours, right? They're going back and forth, task switching, and they're very, very inefficient when they're writing their essay on the crucible. Can you imagine switching back and forth every 5 minutes and having a coherent essay on them? It's impossible. It's also impossible to do really good documents at work. So even at work, some work settings are wondering about how to keep people off, internet while they can do the most important thing. We tend to be a little weak on this. Okay, so there's fear of missing out. There's dopamine. There are all sorts of reasons why kids are going digital. We can talk about that more if you like. But I want to end by saying that all of us coming to a talk like this, okay, all the stuff we have to do for kids, the first thing we have to do is give ourselves oxygen, right? You remember that thing on the airplane, the first time you saw it, you thought it was really weird, right? What do you mean, save yourself before your baby? Didn't you think it was weird the first time? You went, oh, that's right. If you pass out, you're no good to your baby. Remember, did you? Or was it just me? I had a mind going, they're saving themselves. But it's true, you have to oxygenate yourself and feel good about your life and your friends and your health, so that you aren't the colicky family when you go home, that you still have good, working order of the brain so you can think about empathizing and making fun conversations at the dinner. So that has to come first. Okay, now I'll end on this, but I wanted to remind you of acceptance comes first. And I also wanted to make a shout out for the wonderful bookstore Lake Forest bookstore that supplied a lot of books, because we're on this campaign. There are so many schools that are not high resource schools. That's what we call Stevenson, high resource. So if any of you want to buy one of these books and they give it to schools that have nothing, many schools have absolutely no parent materials in the counselor's office. They have nothing to offer their parents at all. So if you want to do a little do-gooder thing, I want that little idea to be planted in your head. And on that note, I'm going to move it to Q&A.